The Mystery of the Cupboard by Lynne Reid Banks, Chapter 6, Pouring the Lead. I did not commit my crime at once. If I had, perhaps I could be forgiven for it, but for 2 years it remained undone, long enough to have come to my senses, but for my better self to take command. But those beautiful sea-green drops dangled in my future, 2 demons in disguise beckoning. I knew I would do it. At that time, Frederick was away at school. Then, as now, that cost money, but I was set heart and soul on his having an education. I had to work harder than ever. The First World War was a curse to mankind, but a blessing to me. There was war work to be done, and troops to be entertained, and between one and the other, I spent my days in a sweatshop sewing uniforms, my nights singing, dancing, and acting on stages. Up and down the land I scraped by. Even so, I could not have managed, had it not been for my gift. I learned the skill of telling fortunes. Telling fortunes is, in the main, a game of deceit. For 99 in 100 in the profession, there is no reading the past or foreseeing the future. They go through an act that is as much make-believe as anything I did on the stage. They give customers what they want. You will meet a dark stranger, you will have children, you will pass through different times to happiness at last. Falsehood and fakery, and I did my share of that. Tea leaves, tarot cards, crystal ball, all the rest of it. But when I tried pouring lead, a common enough method of fortune-telling at that time, I found that through the lead I could raise my craft to the level of true art. Lead pouring worked like this. In an old iron saucepan, I heated up small pieces of lead, bought cheap from a scrap metal man. Lead melts at a low temperature, and when all the lumps had dissolved into a liquid silver mass, I would ask my customer to pour small amounts into a metal bowl of cold water. With a hiss and a cloud of steam, the lead would solidify again into a random form in the bottom of the bowl. I would get this out and examine it, and in the shape, which was often very strange, resembling, just as clouds can, all manner of animals and objects, I would perceive portents of the future, true ones. Once a young woman poured the lead, and instead of fusing together, it all scattered into little bits. In this I read a dangerous carelessness in her nature, and I warned her, and we tried again, and this time it was a death's head. I saw death and nothing else. And though I invented something to please her, I knew as she walked from my dark little basement room up into the sunlit street that she had no time left. 3 days later, she told me she had died in an 3 days later, a neighbor told me she had died in an accident in the factory where she worked. Thus, and through many other proofs, I knew that I had the gift and must use it carefully. I became well known in the profession, and many people consulted me and paid me well. I was able to pay Fred's school fees and put money by. Money I later used to buy this old house where Fred had been born. I never tried to read the fortunes of those few I loved. Maria, who knew that I earned extra money this way, begged me to tell her fortune, but I never would, let alone Matthew's or Lottie's or Frederick's or mine. But sometimes flashes of insight would come to me unbidden. I once saw a dark shadow pass over the face of Matthew as he sat in his garden laughing with Lottie. I fell into a fainting fit, something unheard of for me until my recent illness. Never had a sick day in my life once. Once I saw a diminishing line of Maria's going off into the far distance, like the reflection in double mirrors, which might indicate a long life with many descendants. Or many descendants. When these flashes came, I learned to switch off something in my head, as we switch off electric lights. I did not want to know. When I looked at Lottie, whom in truth I loved better than my own child, it was as if I kept my hand on the switch, holding it firmly in the off position. I could not have borne to see any bad thing in the future of that child. Oh, if I had let myself know! But can we change what we are destined for? Enough repining for what is too late to mend. Jessica Charlotte, tell the tale. The doctor says you haven't much time. The men have come to mend the thatch, so that, however else I have failed him, I may pass this house on to Frederick in good condition. I have thought of my hiding place. Omri! Omri! Omri seemed to wake up. The shouting must have been going on for some time. He jumped up, almost dropping the notebook, and rushed to the door, linking his room with Guillaume's, which was half pushed open against the blockage of bricks. "What, Mum? What's wrong?" "Are you deaf?" she inquired politely, but she was obviously annoyed. "No, Mum. Your supper's on the table. I've been calling and calling. Why have you put those bricks there? I couldn't get in. That's the idea, Mum. Ever heard of privacy? Don't be cheeky. Privacy doesn't apply to mothers." She stalked off. Omri put a marker in the notebook and hid it under his pillow. It was agony to stop reading. He had never in his whole life, not even when reading books about Iroquois Indians, been so caught up in any story. Wow, he thought, taking deep breaths, as if he'd been swimming underwater. It's good I've had some practice keeping secrets. Wish I could tell someone, though. And like an answer to a prayer, in the middle of supper, the phone rang. "Omri, it's for you. I think it's Patrick." Omri jumped up so suddenly his chair went over backward, and he rushed to the phone, which was in the farthest along living room. "Hi, Patrick, is it you?" "Yeah, listen, I've nagged Mum half to death. She says if you can have me, I can spend half-term with you." "Hey, Brill, when do you get yours? Ours starts next week." "Ours too, bit of luck, eh?" "I've got so much to tell you." Omri lowered his voice. "I've found something incredible. You won't believe it till you see it, so I won't tell you now. By the time you come, I'll know more." "Is it to do with—" "Oh, yes. Oh, this is fantastic. Don't let anything go wrong. Promise." Back at the table, grinning all over his face, Omri announced Patrick's visits. His parents said fine, why not? Adiel's half-term was different from that of the other two, so they couldn't even think of going away. Patrick could keep Omri company. "What about me?" asked Guillaume. Can I have a mate stay too?" Omri's heart sank a bit. Guillaume's mates tended to be rather riotous. Their chief recreation was playing very loud pop music and video games. The walls of this new house were thin, but on the other hand, it would be good if Guillaume were occupied and not hanging around with him and Patrick. So Omri was grateful when his father said, "Sure, why didn't Guillaume invite one of his old pals?" It was extremely hard for Omri to settle down to homework or anything else while the notebook lay under his pillow calling to him. His mother had often talked about the way certain books called you when you were really engrossed in them and had to put them down. Now Omri understood. He seemed to be living in Jessica Charlotte's world. He could see her in the sweatshop sewing uniforms with Frederick away at school, as Adiel was. He could see her with difficulty. He had never seen a music hall act on stage, singing and doing imitations and making people laugh. He could see her sitting in Maria's boudoir, staring longingly into the depths of his great-grandmother's jewel case of Florentine leather, the one his mother had told him about, the one his magic key had come from, the key that locked the magic cupboard and made plastic toys into real people from the past. He was going to learn about this now, how it had come about. First the key, then the cupboard. She would come to the cupboard. This notebook held the whole secret of the magic. It was here in his hands, and he was in a hurry. Pressured as he was by the life around him, he was sorely tempted to just flick through the thin pages of the notebook, picking out the bits that concerned him most. Yet he couldn't. It would have been utterly wrong to do that. He felt Jessica Charlotte had written this for him, and it was necessary to read all her words. Anyway, he was interested in her life more and more. He could see beautiful, tall, graceful Maria in her fine dresses, and handsome Matthew and Lottie, his own grandmother, and understood why Jessica Charlotte dreaded being shut out from that happy, wealthy world. Omri already disliked Frederick. All his mother had been through to bring him up. How could it be that he didn't love her, that he despised her being on the stage? Where, come to that, was Frederick at the time when Jessica Charlotte was writing the account? Why was she dying here all alone, caring enough about him to get the house ready to leave it to him, when he couldn't even be bothered to come and look after her or visit her? He must have been a right pig, Omri thought. And where did the cupboard come into it? Omri couldn't wait to read on, but often he had to wait, Just as last year, when he had had Little Bear and the others with him, he had had to lead a secret life within his everyday one. Now it was the same. Life and school went on, and he had to act normally. The time he could spend to be alone and read the notebook was strictly limited. All the time he was reading, he was imagining Jessica Charlotte. Maybe she was wicked. Was she really going to steal her sister's earrings? But he couldn't help liking her and seeing her side. While he read, it was as if he was Jessie, as if, almost as much as when he'd gone back to Little Bear's village for the magic of the key, he were living in history. And that is the end of Chapter 6.